Hey everyone, welcome to the Human Cloud Podcast, the spot where entrepreneurs, innovators, and yes, you corporate warriors come to drive the freelance economy forward. So today we have Pat Petitti. Pat's the CEO at Catalant, and Pat has been one of, I would say, the top 5 leaders in the freelance economy. He's been building Catalant, the leader in independent management consulting. He's been building it since 2012. And so when we look at Pat, there's a couple things I want you to take away, but the most important is that the way he thinks today is driven by 10 plus years of freelance strategy. And instead of just repeating the word freelance, he's going to cut to the core of what a freelance workforce really enables. And a little hint, it's all about transformation, specifically in his space, the transformation from traditional consulting to consulting 2.0. And you're going to see it goes beyond just speed, cost, and quality. It goes beyond being a staffing model or a contingent talent model. And it goes to being able to fundamentally transform your organization. So I couldn't think of a better guest to listen to in the beginning of the year. Now, listen, then go drive some change. All right, Pat, thanks for hopping on, man. So listen, as I promised, we're going to get straight to the core. So everyone out there, if you don't know Pat, you should. Literally, I would argue one of the top 5 people that made the freelance economy real. And it'll be a cute little intro. Don't you worry, I'll tell our story quick. But
Good.
I really want to just let's get straight to it. And Pat, you ask as many questions as you want, by the way. But
yeah, sure.
Let's hit right away. Why does the freelance economy even matter? And keep in mind the lens of, for you listening right now, you have a million things to think about. You probably aren't even sitting in a position caring about talent. You're probably caring about moving your business line forward. But so let's start with that, Pat. Why are we even talking about the freelance economy?
I mean, I think that the freelance economy is inevitable, right? And it's obviously become bigger and more important to companies over time, especially in the past few years. But that's just because the old way of working doesn't really make a lot of sense. Like, why is it the case that, I think back to when I graduated from college, it would have been really weird and viewed in a very strange way and very difficult for me if I decided that I wanted to be a freelancer. Like, Uber wasn't around, TaskRabbit wasn't around, Postmates wasn't around. But the way it works is like you apply to a job, a company gives you a job offer, and then so much of how you live your life is dictated by that company, right? It's like, where do they tell you that your office is? Like, they're going to tell you what building to go to every day. They're going to tell you what chair to put your butt in every day. They're going to tell you what you work on. They're going to tell you who you work with. Like, all of these things that even when I first took my first job out of college, I worked at a big consulting firm. 6 months in, I really didn't like the job. And I couldn't even go and apply for another job because not only was it atypical to want to move jobs quickly, but like your first job, you basically had to be at for 2 years as a full-time employee if you wanted to apply to another full-time job. And so I applied to like 100 different companies. I couldn't even get an interview because I had only been working for about 6 months. The way people worked, it's broken. It doesn't make any sense. And in a world where we are connected through technology, in a world where you and I can be on a Zoom together, feeling like we're in the same room, but we might be on different parts of the world. I didn't even ask you where you are today. Like you might be in the other side of the world right now. You might be down the street from me. It doesn't matter. In a world like that, people should have more control over how they work. And it is a heck of a lot better for your life if you can have more power and control over the way that you work. It's crazy that for up until, a handful of years ago, companies dictated the way you live your life, where you live, who you spend your time with, what you spend your time on. Like, those things were out of your control, and the freelance economy makes it possible.
Let's help me define it. So, and I know, after this question, I'm going to ask you, okay, let's make it specific to consulting, right? But let's define freelance, because this has been one of the biggest barriers. And you and I have been in this for 10 plus years, right? Like, this is one of the biggest barriers is when we say freelancing, are we talking about the staffing industry? Are we talking about total talent management? Are we talking about freelance marketplaces? What are we talking about when we say freelance economy?
I personally think of freelance as work outside of the full-time employment context. So it's being able to basically have more flexibility around how you want to work. You might work 100 hours a week. You might work 2 hours a week. You might work anything in between, but it is being outside of the construct of full-time employment.
I love it. And why?
How would you define it, Matt? Like, what would you think about it differently?
I struggle. Actually, how I define it is I say if you can see the whites of someone's eyes. And I know that sounds kind of like abstract, right? But the reason I say that is because when looking at alternative options, right? Because I think like there's the bare requirements, which is, okay, is this a full-time contract? No. Is this a digitally mediated, meaning you're working usually through something digital? Check that box. But I think what really differentiates it is that when you're working in a freelance capacity, you can see the whites of the person's eyes, meaning you don't have this large agency billing out somebody else that you can't see. And then you can also start to build up a repertoire where either you see their past historical record or you have the exact working relationship between you and them. So I think like that's been the way that I've broken it through with leaders, especially because when they think freelance generally, they're thinking gig economy, right? And so they're going back and they're saying, oh, are we talking about Uber drivers or writers? And the answer is no. We're talking about 15 plus year strategy consultants. We're talking about AI experts. We're talking about fractional folks. But then they get confused if I say fractional. So I personally keep it between whites of the eyes. And then the only next layer I'll go is I'll say typically mediated by a freelance platform because, as you know, at scale, it's easier to work with the freelance platform, even though it can feel like at times, why don't I just work with this person on an individual basis? I don't know. What do you think, Pat?
I think you're getting at one of the challenges for the freelance economy or operating within it, which is for companies to understand it and know how to like absorb it. It depends so much on who the person is in the company, what type of company it is, the types of talent that they're looking for. Like when I've talked to you in the past about this or your colleague, John, oftentimes for me, so much of it comes down to like, what type of work is it that the client has in their mind? Because that determines how you think about how it's going to be different than the way that they've done things before. So, whether it is like you brought up the good example of fractional workers or like interim workers of some form, or consulting on demand, which is really, part of a big part of what we do, or like an Uber driver or a painter, or like, it depends so much on what the nature of the work is. And one of the challenges for companies is when I talk, because we spend a lot of time, of course, talking to executives who are trying to figure out how does their company take advantage of, they might call it the gig economy, they might call it the freelance economy. And so much of it comes down to, well, where do you think your business needs to change how it gets work done? Because the answer to how you solve it is going to be completely different depending on your answer to that question.
Yeah. Let's hit on the value of a marketplace and the value of a platform. The reason I want to hit on it is because as fractional and I still, Pat, I just call them freelancers, but I really don't know the word to use because as the 10 plus year fastly rising individuals choose to either freelance full-time or freelance part-time. These are not like writers, right? Or typical gig workers. But what I really want to hit on is what is the value of a marketplace platform? Because one of the challenges is why don't you just work with this person as an individual? Now, we helped a professional service firm with a very large research project. And one of the big findings was that the individuals at this level commonly were getting put under the approved vendor bucket. And so typically, right, it's Pat LLC, Pat Incorporated, right, Pat S Corp. And they're so valuable that the individual, meaning at the partner level, is willing to just email procurement and say, you must make this person an approved vendor so that they can work with them. But as you and I both know, at scale, that's going to break, right? And so I'd just love to hear from you. And keep in mind, I think the lens I want to use is I'm an individual partner at a big consulting firm. I find Pat, right? I find you 5 years ago bumming around at HBS.
Yep.
Why don't I just have you be an approved vendor?
Okay, great question. Well, first and foremost is the ability to find the right person, right? So I think like a marketplace at its core is meant to do a good job of matching supply and demand. And in the case of a Catalant, that means helping somebody inside of a company. Typically, we work with Fortune 500. We work with pretty much almost every large private equity firm and their portfolio companies, and then we work with every large consulting firm. And what we're helping them do is find the person who has solved their problem before, which means that there's somebody in our network of 115,000 plus independent consultants who has actually done the project or something very, very similar to the project that our client needs to get done. And those people exist in the world. And it might require a team of people. And so maybe they'll bring on one person who then uses our network to build a team. But by and large, like that person or that team of people exists in the world. So that's number one is if you're bringing on somebody, like what I would argue is if you're bringing on one person, you want to use them again and again and again, and it's one person, that's really staff hog. You're not using them to help you solve a discrete and well-defined problem. So that's the first part. Second, though, is if you think about a platform like Catalant, so much of what we do is not just helping you find the person. So much of it is effectively creating the system that makes it possible for people inside the organization to use on-demand independent consultants. Because if you think about how companies operate, if you want to go and hire somebody full-time, you don't just like go out there on your own and find them and then jam them through the hiring process. Like your company has a tool that they use. If it's a smaller business, they might use Lever. If it's a larger business, maybe they use a product from, one of the big technology platforms. But you have a system that you use that helps organize the process, make sure that you're going through all the required steps internally to be able to get the right people on board, drive the process, capture the data around it, and report on how well you do. You need the same thing for hiring independent consultants. And I would argue you need a different thing for hiring independent consultants than you do for other components of the gig economy too. But it's to me, that's honestly about 90% of the value for the large organizations is they need a process through which they can do this. So, I mean, just like the proof is in the pudding, so many of our clients, when they use us, they'll actually show up if they've been using us, over the course of a year. They will start to come to us and say, hey, I already have the independent consultant I want to work with, but can we use your platform to onboard them and then to manage how we bring them into our company? Because you do need a system that helps you do this. And those just don't exist for this category of work when they do exist, of course, for full-time employment.
Let's break down this system. The reason I want to break down this system is because 5 years ago, we would just say, hey, go to Upwork, right? Like we would just pick one freelance platform. We'd pick the biggest. We would take a staff hog MSA and just line it up next to and say, okay, let's ram it through, right? And that kind of worked, right? That worked fine 5 years ago.
Depends what you're looking for.
Depends what you're looking for, exactly, right? But what you're hitting on is, and this was the biggest problem, was in order to drive adoption at scale, you have to go beyond one crazy person that will probably not be in the enterprise in the next 2 to 5 years because they're breaking protocol to get these freelancers in the building, right? So help me understand when we say you need to have a system. Let's start from base one, right? Who needs to be involved? What do they need to care about? And I really, this might be the place too to just kind of give an overview of when we say consulting 2.0, what are we talking about with consulting 2.0?
Yeah. So just on the first piece, and then I'll get into 2.0. On the first piece, the challenge is that different platforms are designed to provide you with different types of talent. So Upwork is an amazing freelance marketplace. It has been around for a very long time. It was a combination of Odesk and Elance. We used Odesk to build our first website, and it was amazing. It was a great experience. We hired somebody in Bangladesh. It was super cost effective. The quality was really high. The experience using that platform was awesome. Like Upwork is an amazing business. It's a great business. But it also is a place you go for a certain type of talent. Catalant is a place you go if you want high-end independent consulting talent. And what we believe we're doing at Catalant is redefining what the consulting industry is. We're creating the next iteration of the consulting industry. And we refer to that as Consulting 2.0. Consulting 2.0 is digitally enabled consulting for an interconnected world, right? Like the traditional form of consulting is that you hire a big firm. They have a model where they bring on a partner who's end accountable for the work. That partner brings on an engagement manager or a project leader. That project leader has a team of junior consultants, and the majority of people doing the work are the junior consultants. They're using the processes and the data and the approach that the consulting firm has used for other types of projects with other clients, But by and large, your work is being done by generalists who are really, really smart and they're working really hard, but they've not solved this type of problem before. They probably don't know much about your industry or your business. And that answer can be good for certain cases. The partners are exceptionally talented. They really do know your industry. They're talking to all the other executives in your industry. They know what's happening and where the business is going, and they're excellent at strategy. The engagement managers or the project leaders are really, really good at running projects, running things efficiently, getting your feedback. They're exceptional like project managers. The junior people are smart, but they've not done this before. I was one of them. And I remember thinking to myself, man, I don't know anything about this business and I'm going to build out at like 4 times what I'm paid. And so that model works for some things. But by and large, those consulting firms have gotten much further away from strategy work and much more into implementation and execution work, and operational work. Consulting 2.0 is designed to help companies find the person who has solved their problem before. And when they can do that through a digitally enabled platform, which allows them to actually find the person who solved their problem before, because we can match them to people at scale, they are able to get the work done faster because it doesn't require onboarding, me when I was 24 years old, who had to figure out for the first 6 weeks of the project, what's this even mean? What's the business do? It is far more cost effective because you are hiring just the amount of what you need. Maybe it's 1 person, maybe it's 5 people, but every single person on your team has worked on this type of problem before. And so you're not paying 4x the rate of the person who is the junior consultant. You're paying the Catalant fee, which is 25% every time, plus the cost for the person to actually do the work. It is far more transparent and fair. Again, we are consistent about what our fees are every time, and most of the money actually goes into the pocket of the person doing the work, which we think is fair and right and appropriate. And the work product is better because you're finding somebody who has actually been in your seat before and is going to be thinking about, how do you actually implement this type of work? How do you actually execute this? How do you make this work inside of a business like this? So the work product ends up being better and much easier to implement. That's Consulting 2.0. And we aren't the consultant. We are the platform that has created and enabled this new iteration of the industry to exist.
So let me summarize that because I think it actually kind of brings everything full circle. So when we talk about why freelance, we're talking about the fact that there is an alternative option now outside of just being full-time or just going with an agency that has that structure, right? So that's why freelance. When we talk about why Consulting 2.0, I think you're hitting on something that is so beyond just saying, hey, this is a freelance solution or hey, this is technology. And that is the fact that should I separate this by management consulting, Pat, or is it good to just say consulting overall?
I think you can say consulting overall.
Okay. So consulting overall, because of the traditional models, was more incentivized to go towards an integration and execution type engagement. And the result is that the strategy isn't as good as if you can go direct to the person that has done it before. And so if traditional, then you typically have a junior person doing the work. And because of that, you have 3+ months built into the onboarding rather than getting the person who's already done it. So that to me is like the tangible outcome.
Yeah. Like, would you rather, somebody who is 20 years into their career, who has worked on this type of problem before, or a 25-year-old who is really, really smart and eager and wants to do a good job, but has not worked on this problem, when the two of them cost the exact same to the end client? Exact same.
And exactly. And transparent in terms of this is 25% rather than, hey, this is a 4x bill out. So, I do have a quick little funny story about this. So this is about a year ago, helping out one of the Fortune 500 consultants and then them helping out one of their clients. I will never forget a couple fresh college grads come to me and say, hey, this Fortune 100 is thinking about a freelance solution. Can you help us? And I laughed and I'm like, why are you two doing this? Right? Why are you two fresh college grads building the freelance strategy for, I think it was one of the top 10 fintech solutions. And it was a chuckle, right? Second example was, and this is actually a big one we've seen in the past 6 months, is they bring me into one of the largest media companies in the world. And they basically have me sit there so that for 5 minutes out of the full workshop, they can go, look at the level of expertise we can bring you from a freelance perspective. And they just go, Microsoft logo, HarperCollins logo, and prior, right? They they were able to win the project because of that. So I totally hear what you're saying when you cut straight to the person who's already done it. Now, you got two directions, Pat. I either want to hear about, tell me about some of these success stories. And what I can't hammer enough for you is the program level relationship success story. Not just we found one great person, but we transformed our organization. And then second, let's talk about the challenges. Now, I've actually never told you this. When I was at Microsoft, one of the best use cases of you that I still have never told you about was one of the top, put it this way, everyone's mutual funds are sitting in there. They were using you guys after they would incubate something for 6 months.
Yep.
You know exactly what I'm talking about. They would use you to justify the investment if they should actually scale it across the org. That was so cool, Pat. That was literally transforming their company because of you, because they had direct access to the individuals.
Cool. Yeah, I know who you're talking about too. Yeah,
it was great. It was great. But you go ahead. Let's start with your success story to challenge.
Still, I mean, I think like there's a bunch of examples I could draw on. I think some of the exciting stuff is always around transformation efforts that companies are going through, because it's a lot. It may be straightforward to put together the strategy, but it's a lot harder to execute it, and that's where we tend to come in. But I think I'll stick with like an example similar to what you just brought up, which is related to how does a company actually innovate and think about doing new things before they actually scale things up and make them a core part of their business. Because of course, you get to a point where like you should have full-time employees who are owning certain things, like in the example you brought up with that big financial services company. But the reality is, how do you make that bridge when you don't have the capabilities needed to do something new, but you have to be able to move quickly and test it out and see if it's a viable idea? We have a large, actually one of our investors is Anheuser-Busch InBev. And the way that they used us for quite a while was in a group called ZX Ventures, where ZX basically was where all new innovation happened within the business. And anytime they wanted to think about starting a new product or wanted to at least investigate whether there was an opportunity for them, they would use Catalant. They'd bring in somebody who was an expert and had operated in that industry before. They'd have that person lay out for them what the opportunities look like. That person could then, or maybe they'd bring on somebody else who was much more operationally focused and could say, hey, based on the assets you already have, here's where you have an advantage, here's where you have some big gaps. And they could take it all the way through testing it out in market before they decided to go full scale. Same thing at a very, very large retailer that we worked with, where they basically needed to, I have to be careful about too many details on this one, but effectively, they now have well over 1,000 US-wide locations that they operate, and it's a new but very important part of their business. And they started by first bringing on a team from Catalant who said, hey, we think that this is a good idea. They then brought on a combination of some of the same people from the original team and some new people to figure out how do we pilot this idea. Then they scaled it up to 10, then 100, and now there are well over 1,000 of them across the country. And it's a type of a retail location for this one large retailer that it's about as much as I can say. But I think those examples are really good ones. And that type of challenge, it connects to digital transformation, right? Because like transformations become the execution arm of strategy at most companies, and digital is, probably about 80% of what lives in what most of those strategies are dependent on. And to do those transformations requires skills and capabilities that the company probably is not good at today, because they aren't designed to do this thing yet. And so those are places where Catalant is typically a really, really good fit, and where companies sort of need to make the transition from the big name consulting firms are awesome at helping you set the strategy and understand what other companies in market are doing. But that when you get to the execution of it, that's the wrong answer. And that's where something like Catalant can be really valuable from a much more programmatic level.
Yeah, it's I think one of the things I would love to see you guys test in 2024 is I wonder if we can finally overcome the don't get fired if you use Microsoft or IBM or McKinsey.
Totally.
Because you guys are able to do that now if you have the individual that has that logo.
We had a speaker at one of our we bring a lot of people we try and bring people in to speak to our team at Catalant. And we had a woman who was on the boards of a couple of big public companies. I can't mention the name, but come and speak recently. And one of the things she said, without me prompting her, was it used to be that the saying was, you don't get fired for hiring McKinsey. Today at our boards, I think you might get fired for hiring McKinsey. And so I think that shift, I know, to hear, because you hear that, I hear that consistently, like the SVP level down. I have assumed that it's less so at the C level and at the board level. But I will tell you that in the past year, because companies have had to spend so much time looking into where they spend their money and how they can cut costs and make sure they're being efficient and basically high ROI spend, they have noticed that their professional service line is very large, oftentimes driven by a few firms, and in many cases, very, very difficult to justify the spend. And I think that has bubbled up to the point where board members know it now. It's why I think Consulting 2.0 is this is the industry's moment, because there's so much cost pressure, it's not really about cost pressure, but the cost pressure has created the awareness of spend that actually is not very efficient or effectively used.
Is it wrong to say that the next 2 years will be a golden time, and I want you to tell me literally the exact role, but will be a golden time for the rising leaders to show their value by leveraging and I'm going to call it a process, by leveraging a process like Consulting 2.0. So what I mean by that is the 8 to 15 year leader like me, right, who's sitting there saying, how do I leapfrog my way into this organization? And their boss is using McKinsey. But is Catalant and Consulting 2.0 a way for me to say, hey, here's my carrot, here's my ticket to climb faster? Am I wrong for thinking that?
I think it's one of the ways that you can operate in a way that is consistent with the way the world works today, and not just because it's the way the company's always done it. I think it's definitely one of them. I wouldn't say it's like the golden ticket, but I definitely think it is part of the ticket. What's very interesting is so many of the people who are moving into leadership roles at companies look like me, or maybe a little bit more experienced than me. And they're people who maybe some of them worked at the large consulting firms, maybe not. Maybe some of them have been in operating roles at these companies for a while. But by and large, they're people who are a lot more accustomed to the way that the world works today, and much more comfortable with the fact that they might work with somebody who is never going to, be in their office in person, or is not under the brand name firm or logo that your company knows and is used to working with. They're a lot more comfortable operating that way. And the more that those people get into decision-making roles, the more you're going to see platforms like Catalant having more and more opportunity. We're already seeing it. I would say that at Catalant, we've noticed it a lot in the private equity industry, because so many people, especially on the operating side, private equity firms have shifted toward investing more and more, especially in the larger firms, but I think it's going to continue in 2024 and the sort of mid-cap and down firms, investing in what they call portfolio support groups or operating teams. And these are people who typically have consulting experience or operating experience, and their job is to help the portfolio companies execute more effectively, set the right strategy and execute against the value creation plans that the firm has when they acquire the company. And those folks have been leading more into Catalant than I've ever experienced before. And I think it's exactly for that. They came from consulting. They understand how consulting works. They know where it's best applied, but they're not afraid to apply it where it's not best applied. And they're used to and comfortably using something like Catalant. They tend to be really sharp people who are super focused on ROI, super focused on value. And we've seen our private equity segment completely take off in the past 6 months. So I often view private equity and the way they operate as an indicator of what's going to happen in the rest of the market.
Yep. Let's talk about the roles. What are the roles of these people? Are these like VP of strategic initiatives? Are these VPs of talent acquisition? What are the typical roles you're seeing?
Yeah, rarely. It's usually not HR, though we have a couple of clients where HR is pretty innovative and forward thinking, that they're sort of our sponsor. But in most cases, and it could be talent acquisition, like there's a very big retailer where VP of talent acquisition is actually one of our top champions there. But I think he's a unique, innovative thinker. But typically for us, it is somebody in like transformation is very often the right place, because transformation was originally created. That whole idea of like a chief transformation officer was originally created to drive a one-time major transformation effort. And so many companies have shifted away from, like the role still exists. It actually, I would say, is increasingly important in most companies, And that's because transformation's job has been to execute against the most important cross-functional strategies for the business. So it's almost like the execution arm of strategy now. And transformation is where we tend to be the best partner because of all the like burning need to be able to get things done. The fact that the work is very broad in scope. It's very operationally focused. It requires skills and capabilities to come in and out and be much more flexible in how you think about getting the work done, much more agile and reactive to what you're learning, and not, some 2-year plan that you just execute against. So transformation is number one. Finance, we've seen a lot more lately, less as a user and more as a champion, because the CFO's office has seen so much about how much the company is spending and where there are opportunities to be more cost effective. Operations and supply chain. I think supply chain's been a big focus in the past couple of years, largely because the market has basically made supply chain really difficult and challenged. I think supply chain is starting to become much more strategic, and companies are very focused on supply chain innovation. It's a place where there's a lot of opportunity, where things like AI and digital have the ability to really transform it. And so supply chain, I think, is another key category.
So transformation, supply chain. Let's what industries do you think are ideal? And the reason I ask this is because when I was building Microsoft's program, we had one of the largest religious organizations, and then we had one of the largest funders for a lot of. So I always said we had heaven and hell points, meaning we had a large range of industries, right?
Yeah.
But then that hasn't been the case across most marketplaces and platforms. And so what you see when you open up the hood of most marketplaces is they're an extension of the founder, and whatever industry the founder was in, they end up owning that industry. Now with you,
interesting.
You've been able, right? Yeah. So for example, if you see, like, we're a marketing platform, typically when you open up the hood, you realize that they're not just in everything marketing, they're more so in one specific industry, and usually in one vertical within that industry. So like, we're just production, we're just presentation design, right? Like, it's really interesting how this stuff forms.
Yeah.
But so for you though, you probably have the broadest. Do you think every industry is suited for this? Or are there priorities in terms of financial services is best, followed by this? What do you think in terms of what industries are really should be embracing this?
I think it's applicable to every industry. I don't think it's industry agnostic at all. I don't think it's industry specific at all. I will tell you that. So we work in we work pharma companies, industrial companies, retail companies, biggest companies in the world, outside pharma, we've healthcare companies in the world. So we are fairly interesting in the two categories. Especially we're issues technologies. And we don't work with large services besides like the one which we do a lot of work with, but it's also not public. And what's interesting is we don't work with the tech industry because a lot of the pain points that have required other industries to get creative around how they solve these work challenges are not consistent in the tech industry, where it's typically been very easy for them to hire very, very good talent. They can overpay. They don't really worry as much about how efficient they are with that spend up until recently. And so I could imagine it changing, but historically it's been the case. Financial services firms, the challenge is that there are, in order to embrace the broad freelance economy, and certainly consulting 2.0, you need a different mental approach to how you think about contracting with freelancers. And financial services firms tend to have by far the most conservative approach to that. And it isn't worth our time, honestly. And sometimes it's impossible to get through the MSA process with those firms because, they just aren't gonna budge, and they aren't gonna be flexible and think differently. And they have good reason for it, because there's a lot more, compliance and regulatory around that industry, but there is around pharma and healthcare too. It's just that within that industry, it's been very, very difficult. I mean, we've had cases where I have had C-level executives have burning needs for people that they've found through Catalant, and they can't get through the procurement process in the financial service industry. So that's like how it plays out. But I mean, I certainly know and I see and I talk to leaders who have needs across every industry. It doesn't matter.
It's so interesting you mentioned that. So right before the holidays, I got a call myself from a CEO of a marketplace that definitely the winner in their space, right? By far the winner in their space. They've been around for 20 years. And so only in the past 5 years have they even used the word freelance. But so this leader was beyond frustrated because they just couldn't understand the inconsistencies in the MSA process, especially within Fortune 100s. And so literally what he said was, what the hell? J&J won't sign our MSA, but is spending $1 million plus with us. Yet X bank, it's been 13 months and we can't get $1 through until they get the MSA signed. So there's these massive inconsistencies. And my answer to him was honestly, hell yeah to the J&J $1 million plus. Boy, are they taking on a lot of risk. But to your point, banking for some reason is just more difficult.
Yeah, totally. And it depends. Like, and the other challenge I think is, this goes back to one of the earlier points we made, is it depends so much on the work, right? And that's one of the problems too, is if you're working in an industry where they've been burned in the past by using freelancers of some type, even if you're talking about a completely different type of work, different type of freelancer, different type of legal construct, it's like, it tends to be the case that most companies, at least from the get-go, don't think about the different types of freelancers or different segments within the freelance economy. It's like, to them, one big bucket, which is clearly not the case. But because they think in that way, it becomes very, very difficult to, partner with them.
Yeah. Listen, Pat, this has been incredible. I'm going to steal 5 minutes of you that I'm going to ask you a question that is not as tactical, okay? And that question is, how long has it been 8 years, Pat, that you've been really, really, really pounding your head against the wall in this space?
Well, let's see. So we started the company as a class project at Harvard Business School in February 2013.
It was 2013?
2013, man.
Why graduated in 2016?
Yeah, we graduated June 2014. And so we've been running it since then. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. So you pounded, what was it, Harvard Square, going in individual businesses, selling something that didn't exist. That was in 2012 or 2013?
2013. Yeah, 2013. We were, spring of 2013, we were every day after class walking across the bridge to Harvard Square or taking the T down to downtown Boston and just cold calling small businesses, trying to convince them. At the time, Hourly Nerd, what our company name was at the time.
And meanwhile, your buddies were getting really lavish jobs, and you were sitting here saying, hey, we have this idea for something called Hourly Nerd. And everyone was kind of so because when we met, it was 2016. I was at Babson, and even professors
still
were
probably
giggling.
Called Hourly Nerd. Yeah.
Yes. It was still yes. But so the overall question, Pat, is why, what really energizes you? What excites you? Why are you still in this game? And you and I are both like sick mental patients, because what's the definition of right of insanity is doing the same thing over and over. But for some reason, we can't leave this space. I will say, when I was in grad school, I remember I had an interview at Tesla, right? And like they took me on the car and everything. I'm like, this is so cool. But then I keep coming back, right? I can't get away from this space, even though we're totally not as sexy as tech and all these others. But what for you, right? Why?
Yeah.
Give me the inspiration for you.
I think I'm like pretty attracted by solving a problem in the world that I feel like I know the answer to. And that, I know that with enough like elbow grease and sweat, I'm going to solve. I think that's definitely one big thing. I also I like being the underdog. I think I've been able to be the underdog in a bunch of ways in my life. And I feel like in the world of consulting, we are, the underdog. We're like the scrappy company that knows how to solve a problem that our clients have. And we have the opportunity to disrupt this age-old industry, these very big firms that are great at certain things, but honestly are doing a lot of work that they are adding a lot of value for. And they're charging a ton of money to do it. And I love the opportunity of being kind of like the scrappy underdog who has the ability to change the way that these companies work and to be like the leader of the disruption. Clay Christensen wrote this article back in 2013. about 2 months after we started the company, and it was called Consulting on the Cusp of Disruption. It was in HBR. Great article. And it basically talked about all the attributes of the consulting industry and many of the things that I've already referenced on this podcast. And so many of those attributes, they're exactly why the industry is being disrupted today. But Clay basically said, these attributes make this an industry that is ripe for disruption. And over time, it's possible for new platforms to arise and be low-end disruptors and one day actually start to win share away from the big brand name firms. And then he wrote a blog post right afterwards that was accompanying the article. And the blog post was called Revenge of the Hourly Nerds. And it was about Hourly Nerd, our company, and how we were focused on small businesses, but because we were taking a technology-first, low-end disruption approach, one day we might have the opportunity to disrupt the consulting industry. And I think that one day is today. And we wouldn't have been able to do it prior to COVID, but COVID and everything that has come since have set a context where we are seeing firsthand major changes to the consulting industry. And that doesn't mean that we're going to put the big guys out of business. It means that we are going to start to win work that otherwise might have gone to a consulting firm, and it might have been a big brand name firm. It might have been a long tail firm. But it's going to have them focus on the things that they know they're great at, and we're going to win more share and in turn help companies think differently about how to get things done. And so the energizing thing for me every single day is, and I'm sure this is the same for you, especially in the past few years, is seeing the momentum behind the opportunity, the fact that all of the things that we believe in and that we knew were going to come true finally are coming true. And some of it's because of our hard work. Some of it's because of luck. We put ourselves into a position where as the market has finally turned, it's existing. Some of it's because COVID forced people to think differently about how they work and who they work with. And so it's not weird that, I might hire somebody who I never meet in person and might just work through, computer screen with them. And some of it's because of the market and the fact that companies have had to take this long, hard look at where they spend their money. And that's awakening them to the fact that they're misusing funds on big firms when they're not getting nearly the ROI that they should be getting. So all of these things, it's a confluence of things that it takes to be able to really drive the disruption that Clay predicted. But everything he predicted, you can see it happening in the market now. And that drives me every freaking day, man. I promise you, I wake up in the morning and I'm ready to attack the opportunity. I really am.
I know you are. You don't slow down. That is for sure. And the moment that, you don't slow down. They're definitely happening.
Why are you still so fired up about it?
Oh man, made a lot of money, lost a lot of money, but I just can't get away from it. I think is the word to put it. We're both Boston guys, so I'll say it straight, meaning not the sexy side. I can't not be in this industry. I think that's the only way to put it. The only job interview I've ever taken was Tesla and John Deere because I just love those brands, but I knew there was no chance I'd ever work for them unless it was
pretty different businesses.
Yeah, because unlike you, I was in the countryside, right? Newburyport was farm. Yeah, but I think for me, it's actually come from a deeper place. So I started in manufacturing, and my favorite people were the people on the manufacturing floor. And so I would hang out with them on their smoke breaks, and they'd be smoking a cigarette, and I was 19 years old, just learning about the world from them. And I remember when I started working, and I went to a Big Four for my first internship, I just remember thinking, this doesn't make sense for people that work hard. And it wasn't no knock on those firms. It didn't make sense to me. And when I dove headfirst into freelancing for, it's 11 plus years now, it's 12 plus, but it just felt like a better method for people that work their ass off. And I think that's what's been driving me kind of through this whole thing. I made
driven by the fact that it's meritocratic, things that are, on the merits. I feel the exact same way. The frills don't get me. It's the fairness, and it's the this is how it should work. That I think are the drivers for me.
Yeah. I
remember
my first couple freelance clients, I did exactly what you did, Pat. It's just I went small business and said, hey, I'm an accounting major. Can I help? And a couple small businesses said, yep, help with accounting. And then it went from helping with their books to helping them win grants to then helping with one client, right? Helping them win or helping them build their private equity strategy. And I was and I loved it, but it didn't hit me that, okay, when I enter the real world, I'm going to have these degrees and just to get into the conversation, when to me, I was I'm going to work a typical Boston guy. I'm going to work my ass off. I'm going to figure it out. And then you're going to pay me what I deserve, and we're going to do it again. So I think that's what I love about it, is the meritocracy of it. I think that's it. Yeah. I'll tell you what, though, this is where you've been way better. I can't get away from building different types of businesses. And so, that's where I got to give it to you. Your consistency beats me, because, that.
We've had our Catalant's had its ventures here and there that have probably taken our eye off the ball a bit, but we've also been fortunate, and the first thing we focused on and understood well is definitely a market that's come a long way.
You've always been able to teach the client how to transform through consulting. That is one thing that's always consistent. I remember looking at your whiteboard, right, and being like, should we invest in all this tech? I do remember that, not going to lie. But you've always been able to help the client transform. That's been the number one thing, no matter what. So listen, Pat, I got 3 fun questions for you that are quick. But before I ask you that, where can our listeners go and find you?
Just go to Catalant.com is our website. We were GoCatalant.com for quite a while, but
I was going to ask
about a year ago.
How much did you have to pay for that?
About a year ago, we finally got the domain. Way less than you would think. There was this company that owned it for a long time, and eventually they were never using it, and eventually they did the right thing. We get a good deal on it. If you want to talk to me directly, my email is just pat@gocatalant.com. So we still use GoCatalant for our email, and or you can send me a message on LinkedIn.
What happens if I do pat@catalant.com?
I don't know. It's a good question. I don't.
Wait, test it.
Find out.
I'll test it for this. All right.
I don't think it goes anywhere.
3 fun questions. What's your favorite city in Boston?
Oh, favorite part of Boston, as opposed to like Boston proper. My favorite area, the Seaport. Our office is in the Seaport. It is amazing new building. We got a great deal through a sublease. The Seaport is just such a great up and coming area. It's got it's got the best restaurants. I love the views of the water. So my favorite is the Seaport for sure.
Is it easy to get to now though? That was always
in the car. It's super easy.
Yeah.
It's like the easiest to drive into. Yeah. I mean, I live in Milton, and it takes me probably like 14 minutes if there's no traffic. And then you can take the train into South Station. It's like a 10-minute walk. Or you can take, I think it's the Blue Line, go straight into the Seaport. Actually, there's a stop there now.
Second question. Would you consider yourself a Boston man?
Oh yeah. I grew up in Dorchester, Yeah. Oh yeah. I think I'd have all the ways you were describing, like the attributes of a Boston person.
I know you do. I know you do.
I've lived outside of Boston for like a year and a half total.
Except, Pat, I'm going to mess with you. The HBS side is not the typical Boston man. It's the typical Milton, Weston, and Wellesley man.
I lived in Austin. But part of Boston. Well, I think that's part of it for me. Is I've always felt like I'm not like the typical MIT person. I'm not the typical HBS person, and I take pride in that in a lot of ways. Kind of like how I think you do too. But I think that's also sort of always driven the way that I think about things,
So I'll give you one quick thing about when I think Boston man. Because unlike you, I just moved to the West Coast, right? It was like, hey, Boston is a little bit too much old money for me. I can't find a way to break in. They don't understand what freelance is. Because like I said, you've always been better, right? And so I pieced out and I said, I'm going to Silicon Valley, where as long as you can code, they'll accept you. But when I went back to Boston 2 years later, everyone started looking the same. Do you know what I mean by that, Pat?
What do you mean?
All beefy white guys wearing Lululemon polos or Lululemon t-shirts. And I kept going, oh, I just saw that guy. Oh, I just saw that guy. And realized, nope, just a typical beefy guy, which both of us...
Those aren't the real Boston, though.
Those are the real Boston.
I don't own a Lululemon piece of clothing.
Yeah, but you still look like a beefy white guy. I would still think you were looking like the guy next to you. It's a compliment. It's a compliment. Last 2 questions. Favorite show that you're watching right now?
I rewatch a lot of shows. So I just finished rewatching The West Wing, which I love. And I've just started rewatching Sopranos. Two pretty different shows. But I like how especially The Sopranos, I like the way that it gets at, makes certain types of people tick, and what's like at the core of everybody is really the same, regardless of whether, you're a crazy murdering monster or, a normal person.
I like that. Okay, you got one more question? Actually, two more questions. Bova, modern, or Mike's? Determining if you're a sociopath.
I mean, Mike's pastries.
Okay, good.
Hands down every time. Yeah,
Some people
you
say
need the
modern.
real deal. The other one, it's ridiculous. I mean, if you want to avoid the line, like I would never stand in that line. But
they have multiple locations now, Pat, and you can deliver it. So I'll give you one quick little tangent onto it. But so, I was coming off a big work trip. I locked myself in a hotel outside Logan for like 3 to 5 days, right? Told my family, don't contact me. I go on to Uber Eats. You can Uber Eats Mike's pastries now, Pat.
Huh. Is it from the original though?
I don't know, but it was just as good because I had not had it in a while. It was that and the Levain cookie. Oh my God. It was good.
Pretty good. I refuse to wait in the line, but yeah, it's good.
I know that's part of but also I remember when we were younger, dude, it was $2 a cannoli. It's like $6 now. It's insane.
I know. All the tourists. Yeah.
Okay. Last question. Favorite animal and why?
Favorite animal. Oh man. My kids have been asking for one of these. My wife is not going to allow it. But I really like cats. And I I grew up with dogs. I love dogs.
Really?
I'm like a dog guy for sure. But what I like about cats is that they don't just instinctively like everybody who they meet. You have to actually earn their love and their respect. And they also don't want to show you that they love you. They do make you really earn it. And they make you work for it, which I think is fair.
So what I'm hearing is you like the chase. You have a sadistic side that enjoys the chase, and now that Catalant's going well, you're married with kids, you still need something to chase, and so cat is what you want.
I just don't want the cat going and loving everybody. If I put in the work for this cat, it should love me.
They were going to say a golden retriever, so you actually stumped me with that one, Pat.
I love dogs. Big dog guy.
That is so. All right, listen, everyone out there at Catalant.com now, please go to Catalant.com, not Go Catalant anymore. If you really want to, type in hourlynerd.com, just see what happens. When you email Pat, it's pat@gocatalant.com, not Catalant, pat at gocatalant.com. Pat, thank you so much for hopping on, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me, man. This was fun. Great to see you again. And love the beard, by the way. Congrats on that.
Thanks, bud. I'm trying to separate as a Boston guy. All right, Pat, thank you so much.